What's up, guys? Swift here. I got my guy Jacob Lintner in the chat. I met him down at the Senior Bowl. Awesome time down there. He's actually attending Florida State. He's there right now down at Florida State. So if he has any background noise, we apologize. They're college kids, man. You guys know how they are. Jacob, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the people where they can find you at as well.
Yeah, my name is Jacob Lintner, and you can find me on Twitter at Lintner Media. I cover football. I really enjoy the draft. I actually cover all sports, but really NFL draft is my favorite thing. So I appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, it's my favorite time of the year, man. I like to say draft is like my Christmas time of the year. It's time I'm most excited about. I think most fan bases, it's everyone can be optimistic. You have this slate of great players coming out of college that your team could have any one of them. And this year, there's so many players at the top of the draft I'm in love with. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. Any guys in particular that you're either pounding the table for, or someone you might say is a sleeper that no one's talking about, or just a guy that you really like? Whatever you want to lead off with, go ahead.
Yeah, I think looking at like what generational prospects are in this class, I really do think one me and you both got to see at the Senior Bowl, Jackson Powers Johnson is, I believe, a generational prospect. I truly do. When you just look at him in all fronts, watch his film, look at how he plays, he really is going to translate to the next level. And when you look at a lot of teams that kind of have a leg up on the O line, like the Lions and the Chiefs, and in the past, I got to watch the Steelers with Marquise Pouncey really just have that center. And I think Jackson Powers Johnson plugs in and immediately almost becomes that center to kind of anchor your O line for just a long time to come. So getting to watch him in person as well is so convincing. Even got an interview with him was super cool. But yeah, so generational wise, I truly think he is. I'm still standing on Marvin Harrison Jr. being generational, which it's been interesting to watch the conversations on Twitter recently between him and Neighbors and Odunze. I think it's very fun to watch. And again, a lot of people want to be right, and we're not exactly sure what right is. I like the kind of idea that Neighbors is maybe a more versatile scheme fit than a Marvin Harrison. But I truly think I don't care what team you are, I still think you take the generational guy, which is Marvin Harrison. But I think it's a really fun debate, and it's something that really brings to light how talented Neighbors is. When through the year people knew he was really really good, but maybe not in that same conversation as Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, man, he's awesome. I think the decision, both of them have, I think, came out recently and said they're not going to test at the combine, and I wouldn't either if I was them. They have nothing. All they can do is hurt themselves if they don't run a fast 40 time. Both those guys are top 5 picks to me. I think this year's wide receiver class, I talk about it all the time. I call this like the year of the wide receiver because there's just so many guys. Do you feel the same way about this year's wide receiver class? That it's just insanely talented, or?
Yeah, I do. Maybe not. Maybe I'm not as convinced that there's so many top tier, like maybe round one guys, but I do think that when there's so much talent through all the skill positions going through, that there's going to be guys in round two and three that in other years would so clearly be in round one. And I think that's very valid to say that it would be still the year of the wide receiver, because you can get these elite players, especially guys that may not be fully well rounded, but they have an elite trait. So I think that being able to get someone like that, and if you're a team that develops those guys in a great way, maybe even like a Keon Coleman, he's an elite go getter of the football. Like he can get up there and do that. Maybe he's not the full player that you want, but if you can develop that, man, we've watched DeAndre Hopkins dominate for a long time with that ability. So I think, yeah, I completely agree with that, and it's super fun. Like teams that get receivers this year, it's gonna be so much fun to get to root for these new guys.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Keon Coleman. He's one of the guys who, over the entire season, just watching college football this year, he started it out right away, coming from Michigan State. One of the first games of the season against LSU, he comes out and Florida State, LSU, he scores 3 touchdowns in that game. And the dude is just a monster. His ability to just go up and get the ball, he has a ridiculous catch radius, insane concentration when he's in the air. And that's a guy, man, I'd love to have him. I think I could see 6 to 7 wide receivers going in the first round. It just depends on which teams take them and how they shake out their board, because there's a lot of different guys there, but I could talk about wide receivers all day. Do you have another wide receiver you want to talk about?
Yeah, I would just go back to a really hot topic name as a riser, is Brian Thomas Jr. You really just look at what he has, and it's everything you really want in an NFL receiver. Although he is still raw in areas which, like, the traits are a big draftable thing, and they do kind of outweigh at some points the not even the production, but just some of those flaws, like he just has concentration drops. Like there's certain things like that. But I think he is a really cool wide receiver and someone that we could see really kind of ease up that board more and more and more. I'm not sure if he's participating in the combine, but I do believe that would be a big deal if he does, especially with Marvin and Neighbors being out of there. I know Odunze is, I believe,
Okay.
participating in the combine and running the 40, and so is Keon Coleman. That's all. That'll also be interesting to see. I don't really expect too fast of a 40 out of him, but he does have some sneaky getaway speed, football speed more than just straight 40. So it'll be interesting to watch. But Brian Thomas is a super interesting prospect. He's been just a hot topic on Twitter because of his size and speed combo. I mean, it's ridiculous. And if someone can really hone that in, I think it could be dangerous. I mean, immediately everyone looks straight at the Dolphins. It's like everyone's like, "Uh oh, speedy big guy." Like
Uh-oh.
this looks like someone the Dolphins would love to have. And maybe if let's say Jackson Powers Johnson pops to the Steelers at 20, maybe all of a sudden the board's looking like Brian Thomas Jr. for the Dolphins. So that's a fun guy to look at. Also, some of the Senior Bowl guys that like really just seem to be so separate in the class were Lad McConkey and Roman Wilson. Those guys were really fun to watch, and it was like again, 1v1s are just super slided towards wide receivers, especially when you're out there on the 40. So you really take it with a grain of salt, isn't the best way to put it, but you really do take context into those. But being able to consistently dominate those and really demonstrate their great footwork and just their great route running abilities, I believe did boost their stock. Roman Wilson had that immaculate catch. Super crazy. So I do believe both of those
That
guys
sideline
jumped
one,
a
yep.
bit. And I do think there's some teams, especially teams with younger quarterbacks. I believe a lot of people are realizing that what they want more in a rookie wide receiver is someone that can separate more than necessarily the guys like the Jonathan Mingo who the Panthers went after last year. He may pan out, he may be awesome, but that's not the guy they needed year one. They needed someone that could separate like a Lad McConkey for a Bryce Young
Yeah, they
who
would have been a lot happier with Tank Dell, I'm sure.
exact. Someone that can actually separate, make it easier on a younger quarterback. I believe a lot more teams are going to start looking that way, and those are two guys, especially Lad McConkey, that I believe fall into that category this year.
The 1v1s down there at the Senior Bowl, it allows them to those guys who excel with the short area quickness and the elite acceleration that are slot guys in the NFL. Roman Wilson, Lad McConkey, even Ricky Pearsall and Luke McCaffrey. Those guys all had great Senior Bowls, but it kind of tailored to their strengths, the drills they were doing. So I don't want to overrate those guys, but you're 100% right. Roman Wilson was probably the best receiver down there, and Lad McConkey was right there with them. Those guys were dominant all week. But this class, like I could talk about wide receivers forever. Seriously, like we didn't even mention Brendan Rice or Javon Baker, or any of those other guys who I loved seeing down at the Senior Bowl. But I always like to focus on the trenches. Is there a guy other than Jackson Powers Johnson on the offensive line that you really love?
Yeah, on the offensive line, I think it's super fun this year. I mean, there's just some really touted guys. I would say Talisa Fuaga from Oregon
My
State.
guy.
I really do
I love
believe
him, man.
I believe he's pretty pinned in at 10, unless someone wants to come get him earlier, because someone definitely could. But the Jets just like, I don't know what it is. I've seen that in so many mocks, but it makes so much sense to me. He is really, really solid, fun to watch. But yeah, there's just a ton of guys this year. Had an opportunity to talk to Tyler Guyton and Patrick Paul. I believe Tyler Guyton would be, far higher up than a Patrick Paul would, different tiers of player. But Tyler Guyton, big dude, absolutely huge dude, and teams really like their different archetypes of linemen. And really, honestly, Tyler Guyton, Oklahoma, really feels kind of like someone the Cowboys would kind of like as a tackle. I
Yep.
know they may be looking to dip back into that tackle pool this year, but yeah, just some movers this year, some big dudes, and I think some teams are really going to have some staple tackles coming from this class. I saw something on Twitter that was talking about that we kind of see tackles as more of like a lock to be surefire hits, and they've become less of that, honestly. But this year, honestly, we may see that trend change because I truly believe in these guys this year.
Yeah, a lot of big guys. They all have giant wingspans with their 34 plus inch arms and a lot of agility and nice footwork. I saw it with Tyler Guyton, surprised me. Same Jordan Morgan. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about him, but
Mm-mm.
I watched back a lot of tape from down there at the Senior Bowl because a lot of wasn't really getting to like watch it. I mean, I'd see it, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't be able to process all of it. I didn't really see him lose a rep the whole week, and
Yeah.
he's another guy who's just a lot of tackles in that first round. I'd say the first 50 picks, there's a lot of tackles in there as well. Another class that's very deep.
Yeah, for sure. Another guy that really just knocked my socks off, and I hadn't really heard of him much other than seeing him in mock drafts. It was Christian Haynes,
Oh, yes.
the Yukon guard.
And he was playing center too, man.
Yeah, he had a week. Like he had an absolute week. I mean, he was all the noise coming out of there, and I believe that his stock took a huge jump because of what he did down there. So yeah, Christian Haynes, Yukon, look out for that one too. Very impressive.
I talked to him and I asked him myself because I saw him. I was impressed with him already as a guard prospect, but then seeing him transition to center and handle a lot of those guys in the one-on-one drills, and he looked like he was snapping the ball well. Even in the team drills, he played center well. He had the athleticism to get to the outside, and he said he could play center or guard, put him anywhere on the interior, and he's going to be a monster. And I love that guy, man. I'm glad you brought him up too. He's another guy I haven't got to talk enough about, but his Senior Bowl was awesome. He had a
His
killer
team,
week. Where do you see him go? I think he's probably second rounder.
yeah, I think he's a second rounder. I think he could be in that 35ish range. Really, that top 10 picks of the second round there. It just really depends on teams looking for. I truly believe that there's a lot of holes to be filled on O lines, and even where there's not holes, people know that you need depth on the O line. So I believe these guys will get they'll get picked. So
100%, man. It's a killer class. I love so many players in this draft. I could probably talk about it forever. But I do got to ask you an off the draft question. Are you I see the Pittsburgh. It's the Pirates hat, but are you a Steelers fan as well?
yeah, of course I got the yeah.
Okay, okay, there it is. There, that's what I thought. I thought so. I just wanted to double check. So
Yeah.
I didn't ask Efram this, so I got to ask you. Any thoughts on the Justin Fields to the Steelers trade rumors, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So ton of buzz around my Steelers community with this going on, and the big things to hit on are that Tomlin loved Fields as a prospect, spent a ton of time diving into him, and really saw liked what he saw in Justin Fields, and that's something to be noted because Mike Tomlin tends to spin back on guys he doesn't get to pick, and he hasn't really had a shot on a prospect that touted in a while. Kenny Pickett definitely was nowhere in the realm of a Justin Fields college, level of prospect. So I think that's to be noted. Do I think they pull the trigger and make that trade? No, I don't. What's the alternative? Where else would he go? I don't know. So
He's not
maybe they
getting
do.
traded.
I, yeah, he may not. That's the thing. I really don't know. I believe he will. I truly do believe he will get traded. But Steelers, I don't think we make that move. Um, I do know that they noted that they're going to bring in another quarterback to that room. Now that's either Russell Wilson, which I'm not. I'm not.
Want me to tell you who I think it is?
Yeah,
Ryan Tannehill.
yeah. I mean, that's the Arthur Smith, and I would be sick. Like I just keep Pickett and Rudolph, man. Like, do not bring me a Ryan Tannehill. I would be not happy with that. I would rather Fields than Russell Wilson, for sure. Now, a Kirk Cousins, if some way we got budgeted on that, I wouldn't mind that, for sure. And maybe you're giving Kenny Pickett now a period to try to learn from him. It's super awkward. I don't think there's any really chance of saving that at this point if you move on and do bring in another quarterback that's not Mason Rudolph. But yeah, so I don't think it's happening. I don't think it'd be the worst thing, but the Steelers way is the Steelers way. I don't see us making that kind of move, but very interesting for sure.
Gotcha. I would say I'm pretty on the record. I do not think Justin Fields will be traded. I think we're going to move down and trade the number one pick. I do believe there's a chance, and if he was traded, I would say I think the Steelers probably make the most sense.
Mhm.
other than the other teams have higher second round picks than you guys. And if we get multiple offers of a second round pick, you could lose out on that. But I think Tomlin would take the chance, a second rounder for Fields. If I was in his shoes, I would. If it was on the table,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would.
I don't think it's a bad idea, and the more I talk about it, like, it seems almost inevitable. So I don't know. That's a tough one because I
I
definitely
seen him smiling, man. He was thinking about it. He was like, "Man, Fields in the Steelers jersey.
yeah.
Ooh."
I mean, and you watch the clips of Tomlin really doing his due diligence on Fields pre-draft, and man, he liked him. Like he really liked him. So I could see it. It's an interesting. It'll be interesting. That could happen that could happen the next couple of days, if it does. So
Hey,
will be something to watch.
hey, combine is here. Workouts start on Thursday. This is when time of the year it starts kicking off. Free agency's coming in less than 2 weeks, man. We're right there. Any other final thoughts you have for me, or anybody? Did you want to talk about another prospect or anything?
Other prospects, we can just hit on a couple more Senior Bowl guys.
Okay.
I really like some of I believe a position group that isn't necessarily as strong this year, but still has a couple dudes is the D tackles. D tackles are very interesting evaluation this year because you got a a smaller guy but great pass rusher and Byron Murphy out of Texas, and then you got Johnny Newton out of Illinois, which there's by Chicago,
Yep.
and I believe Chicago still needs a D
We
tackle.
do. I don't think we're drafting one that high, though, to be honest. We took
No,
one in the second and third last year and re-signed Andrew Billings, so
yeah,
I
probably
just
not.
don't see it.
So there's Johnny Newton there, and then the guy I just want to highlight is Braden Fisk. I know
Ooh,
he
yep.
has the shorter arms. He's an FSU dude, so got to really shout him out. He has the shorter arms, but you want to talk about a motor. You want to talk about someone that plays all the way through. He had some beautiful reps at the Senior Bowl, and he really just showed his hustle and his effort and his motor. If you want to watch some tape that's makes any D line coach happy, go watch the ACC championship and watch Braden Fisk work all game relentlessly. I don't know how you can really ignore that tape. I know that he is gonna struggle a little bit with the shorter arms, and he did get tossed on one rep by Javion Cohen, the
Yep.
guard out of Miami. But yeah, Braden Fisk, very fun. Some other guys, Byron Murphy evaluation. His stock is a really wide window when it comes to when you listen to people talk about where he could be
I've
going.
seen him as high as number 10 overall. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you see almost a top 10, and then you see, back into the first or even in the second, just depending on if a team wants that kind of pass rusher. I almost look at him like Kalijah Cansey last year.
I was just gonna say that name. I was like, that's a Kalijah Cansey from last year. He could have
Yeah,
went that high, but he only fits in certain schemes, so you never know where he's
exactly.
gonna go. Yep.
Exactly. So yeah, that'll be interesting. But yeah,
And
it's
then
fun to
I
look at.
wanted to add on Braden Fisk real quick. You didn't mention it, but I know you know this. First guy ever traded on Senior Bowl. He was traded to the other team
Yeah.
live during the game. And yeah, awesome guy. Love the Florida State guys. I think he's a guy who could be a real good value. And I loved what Fisk brought to the table as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, great guy. But yeah, he did get traded. That was funny how they did that. But yeah, it was a blast. It was a blast at the Senior Bowl this year, getting to see all these guys in person. First time I ever did it.
It was
Uh,
my first time too, man. Awesome time.
awesome. Yeah, it was awesome getting to meet all you guys too. That was a blast. So I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah. Hey, one more time, tell the people where they can find you. And it was an honor having you on here, man. Glad I got to meet you at the Senior Bowl. We got to do this again sometime, maybe after the draft as well.
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on Twitter and really all social medias at Lintner Media. I'll just be keeping up with the draft content. So follow if you're into that kind of stuff. And yeah, again, it was a blast. And thank you so much. We got to do this kind of stuff again for sure.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What's up, guys? Swift here. I got my man Efram in the building. I met him down at the Senior Bowl. Good to see you, man. It's great. That was one of my favorite things about the Senior Bowl, linking up with other people. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people where they can find you as well.
Hi, it's nice to be on the show. You're exactly right. That was the highlight of the Senior Bowl meeting. All the other creators and all the other dudes who just are excited about the draft process. So, yeah, you can catch me over at Mr. Irrelevant on Twitter. And then you can catch my work over at Toilets to Titles, where we record podcasts and put out articles weekly. And then I started writing for Steelers Depot. So if you're, I post all my stuff there, or you can just follow them and see any of my draft profiles.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, we're going to get right into it today. We're talking NFL draft coverage. We're just a couple weeks away from free agency right now. So we still don't have it narrowed down exactly what every team's needs are. But I think we're both digging in deep into the draft right now. So lead off with whoever you want to talk about first. If there's a guy that stands out or someone that just really you want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the guys kind of sticking in my head are the Senior Bowl players because it's this thing of watching people on tape and then there's, seeing them in person, seeing how they play against other players you've watched and talking to them and seeing how they just navigate the whole week in general. And the guy who I came the most impressed by was Ricky Pearsall, the receiver from Florida. And
Ooh.
people heard about him over the season with that one-handed catch. He was really torching everyone in mobile. He came in a little bit heavier, which was nice. And when you have a player who could win with routes, with separations, with nuance, and not only has the skill, has the nuance to put it all together, you could really count on him to contribute as a rookie. And I've seen people putting him at like a late third, even like early day 3 before this. I would be comfortable taking him in the second, just because he's a guy who I know could separate, get open, and obviously we saw that one catch. He has great hands.
Yeah, I think it's tough with any receivers kind of figuring out where to place them after the top 3 receivers. It's so deep. And probably my biggest question with him is where does he fall compared to guys like Lad McConkey and Luke McCaffrey, who we both also saw at the Senior Bowl? To me, my biggest thing is if I could get Luke McCaffrey 2 to 3 rounds later, I might prefer that. But I do love Ricky Pearsall's game.
Yeah, I feel similar with Lad. Like, I think Lad's going to go higher when you get a Georgia guy who also completely dominated. If without the medicals, I think Lad could be a late first. And medicals, me and you, at least I'm speaking for myself, aren't really doctors. It's hard to really say until we get the info out from the combine, right? So, he had a bunch of injuries in college, but withstanding, based off just talent and production, I would have Lad McConkey as a late first, early second above Ricky. And, it's harder for me to talk about Luke. I haven't watched as much film as I did the other guys, but he did look very good. He does offer a similar skill set. So you're right. Like, when you have like 20, 20 receivers in the top 100, right? Like, it's not only, who do you want? Or it's saying, hey, can we go pick a guy a round or two later and just get the value on that?
And it's just kind of trying to place all of these guys when there's that many receivers and you're putting a board together. It's just kind of hard trying to piece them to teams because every team is going to have their board stacked so differently. Once we get to the NFL draft, how do these guys actually get drafted? Who's still there in round 2? Who's still there in round 3? So that's crazy. But I do love Ricky Pearsall's game. His one-handed catch stood out, but we
Yeah,
saw him cooking people all week and running routes at the Senior Bowl as well in practice. So
he's good. Yeah, I guess another guy is
mm,
Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia, who he will be a first rounder. But obviously you have Joe Alt and Olufashanu at the top. Everyone's going to be talking about them. And then after I've been seeing a lot of Taliesin Fuaga because he just mows people down. I've been seeing a lot of J.C. Latham because he's arguably the strongest player in the draft. And then when you have Tyler Guyton showing up the way he did at the Senior Bowl, he's been gaining a lot of hype. And all those guys are deserved. All those guys are great tackle prospects. He's just an absolutely phenomenal tackle class with probably the most day 2 depth I've ever seen. Right,
yeah,
but for me,
Tyler
yeah,
Guyton really stood out at the Senior Bowl too. I wasn't as high on him, but yeah, he had a great week.
just standing next to him, you see just how broad his shoulders are, and you see how easy he carries his weight, and it was just everything's effortless for him. And yeah, he has stuff to work on. He has hand placement and kind of winning, not just on his athleticism and his build, but his strength. But sorry, his traits. But Amarius Mims, I have him as a top 10, top 15 player in the class. I think he's fantastic, and he's going to get this project label because he didn't play many games, and that is the big concern because he doesn't have much on film, but his film is great. His film is NFL ready. His film is full of great pass protecting reps. His film is all of good feet, right? Like he would have been right there with contention with Paris Johnson for my offensive tackle, right? And I'll say this: it's hard to say with a guy who played as many games as Amarius Mims did, but based on his body of work, I would put him similar to Paris Johnson. And if I had to project what the rest of his college career could have looked like with what we saw on tape and his athletic abilities, it's not crazy to say he could have been up there as the number 1 tackle taken last year.
Oh man, I like that. And last year's tackle class was just as good, or not as good, but was very top heavy as far as the draft was concerned. We didn't have as much depth. I feel like this year there's a lot more depth at the tackle class, and we could
Yeah.
see more guys falling to that day 2 range.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is a very deep class because we have the guys at the top, and then you can just list off like second rounders. You said Tyler Guyton be a second rounder, Jordan Morgan, Sua Matea, the Yale attacker Kieran Amadeji, Patrick Paul. Like there's just dudes on dudes on dudes, and then obviously you have all the tackle guard combos. And usually it's like you take a tackle in the top 10, top 15 because you can't really bank on anything past the first round. This year you can, so it's going to be interesting to see how they fall.
Yes, and those are two of the classes that really stand out when it comes to depth and talent at the top of the draft. Wide receiver, I think it goes all the way to the end of the draft. Probably you're still going to find guys in round
Yeah.
6 and 7 that can contribute. No other class is quite that deep, but tackle is one that is definitely going to go into day 2 with guys who can come in early and can contribute. Jordan Morgan is another guy you mentioned there, and I actually wasn't as high on him heading into the Senior Bowl. But man, I don't know if he lost a rep the whole time he was down there. Talking to him, he had an awesome personality, seemed like a guy that, and he was adamant he wants to stay at tackle. He was like, I'm a tackle, I'm not a guard. So I loved hearing that from him, and I think his game's going to translate well.
That's funny you say that because I was kind of flipped, right? And I don't think his Senior Bowl was like horrible. I don't think he had a bad Senior Bowl per se, but I really liked him coming in. I thought he's clearly a very experienced tackle with great feet, great movement skills. I actually wrote up his profile like 2 days ago, or it got published a couple of days ago,
Nice.
on Steelers Depot. So I got a deep dive on, he's just a fantastic tackle prospect. And really the issue is his build. Like he is built more like a guard. He's sub 33-inch arms, and he's just a stout, burlier build that you don't generally find at tackle. Like him standing next to Patrick Paul and Tyler Guyton, it's clear why NFL teams may want him to move to guard, right? And while he didn't lose that many reps in mobile, it was clear that there were reps where I think Darius Robinson, the Missouri edge rusher, caught him with length. Like a couple of dudes were able to, pressure him with length. And, I put clips on the profile. They're plays in college as well where defenders were able to get an extra step on him. And when your legs aren't long enough and you don't have the kind of mobility, or he has the mobility, when your legs aren't long enough to cover that ground, you end up falling a step behind. And that is an issue, right? So look, he's an awesome player. If he's not a tackle, he's going to be a guard. But I agree that, if he wants to be a tackle, you got to let him try to be a tackle.
Yeah, I love his game. Where do you have him ranked at in your tackles? Since you're done with his game, where do you have him at in your tackles?
Right now he's tackle 6. He's number 6.
Okay.
But I haven't fully updated from the Senior Bowl, so I might have Tyler Guyton below him before, and I'm going to do a little rewatch and might have Tyler Guyton above him. So either 6 or 7.
Okay, that sounds right. That sounds right about where I have him. Yeah, it's such a top heavy class. There's a lot of guys in there, and that's with me having Troy Fautanu at guard.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I love Troy Fatanu's game. He's a killer. I'd love to have him.
Did you have Grant Barden at guard or at tackle?
I have him as interior guard or
Okay.
center. I have a
Yeah.
lot of people have him sliding back to center, and the Bears have a huge
Yeah.
need at center, so I kind of have him at center.
Yeah, it's a fun center class. Like him, Powers Johnson, and Frazier are all going to be, all three can go by the end of round 2.
Yeah, I think Frazier has a chance of sneaking into round 1. Actually,
I don't know how much he's testing at the combine, right? Because I don't know with the injury, but he really could. I think he would have blown it up, and I think he would have done absolutely awesome at the Senior Bowl.
I'm pretty sure he's going to be healthy for his pro day, but I don't think he's going to be ready to compete by the combine based on what I've heard so far. But yeah, if he would have been healthy for the Senior Bowl, I think he's a guy who could have stood out almost as much as JPJ did, and people would be talking about him a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I like this film more than Jackson Power Johnson. I just loved his intensity and the strength. Like I thought he was a better athlete than JPJ, but you can't compete with what he did at the Senior Bowl, right? Like,
yeah,
it kind of. I guess it was my first time down there, and it was like, okay, like there's watching film, and you got to trust your eyes when you're watching film. But when you see these guys in person against these players in person, it just everything becomes so much more clear. And my big board's going to end up with like all the Senior Bowl guys at the top, way too weighted, so high up there. But I think
it's hard.
It shows how, it's just so valuable.
Yeah, there were so many guys that just stood out, and when you seen them, there's no way you can't move them up the board. I mean, JPJ was one of them. Seeing him in person was one of the most impressive centers I've ever seen. Like at first, I questioned his athleticism, but then seeing him out there on the move, it's like, oh my goodness. And then the other guy, Darius Robinson, a lot of people had him down in the 3rd round. I was already a little higher on him than most, but when you watch a guy like that and watch him dominate players who were supposed to go in the 1st round, and you're like, this guy's he's gonna go a lot higher once we get to the NFL draft.
He's fantastic, and like the thing with at least for me for edge rushers is you got to have a way to win. Like you got to have a staple. You're lined up one on one against an offensive lineman. How are you going to win the rep, right? Because it does two things. One is just like you need something to build on, something to go when you're losing a rep, sometimes something to go on like a third and long. And when you have, let's say, you're just super fast off the edge, right? You have a great release, you're Chop Robinson, then offensive linemen have to adjust to that. And then you could mold your whole game, setting up counters and setting up fakes, as opposed to the guys who, are fine at a bunch of different things, but don't have anything that could really threaten the offensive lineman. And Darius Robinson, just his arm length and knowing how to use his arms to his advantage with rips and pulls and just attacking with a two-handed punch, he'll be able to do that to NFL offensive tackle. So while the rest of his game may not be as well-rounded, and he'll get some critique for being an older prospect, he's going to test well, and he'll be able to build everything off of this baseline of length and this baseline of winning with length.
Man, yeah, he's one of my favorite players in the draft. I have him and Brandon Dorless as kind of similar players. They both have that length, the athleticism. They can play inside, they can play out. You could have them play at edge if you wanted to, but a lot of people want to move them inside to three tech as well. But they're versatile and can play anywhere and get after the quarterback, and that's what I love about their game.
Yeah, I love Dorless. Dorless was one of my favorite players to watch last year. He was the first guy at the Senior Bowl who I made sure to interview because I was like, I love your game. It's clear you're super intelligent player, and I have questions on how you're going to slide in to the NFL. So I think he's awesome. He's a little bit bigger, just like more meaty than Darius Robinson, but I think he's going to be a good NFL pro. I think he has all the intelligence. He's played everywhere. He's led a team, and he's just very talented and knows how to do a lot of different things. And last year the big question was, is he an edge or is he interior? And it was clear that they moved him more to the inside. And the question was, well, can he successfully win reps from the inside on rush downs, right? Is he going to be able to stop the run? Is he going to be able to two-gap? And he basically did everything that the Ducks asked of him. And when you do that, I could see him being an early second.
Yeah, I see that as well. And then he also continued that up by going down to the Senior Bowl and improving on those performances against some of the best in the nation. And he stood out to me a bit. If it wasn't for Darius Robinson, he might have been the best interior guy there. And then as well as, Liatu Latu obviously had a great week as well, but you can't, we're not talking about him right now. He's just a beast. But other than him, it was Darius Robinson and Brandon Dorless that really stood out for me. And Dorless is going a little under the radar because of the performance that Darius Robinson had. But you can't forget about him as well. Both guys dominant.
Yeah, and another guy, Marshawn Nealand.
Oh, yeah.
From Western Michigan, I want to say. Western Michigan. He was also the Senior Bowl is built for these players who are coming from small schools and didn't face, the competition that these SEC Big Ten players faced and are physical talents. And you want to say, okay, again, the same thing with Quinion Mitchell, right? You want to see these players and say, how well can they compete? Not just, in the game, but in the individual drills. These players, just the practice level of a team like Western Michigan and the practice level of Georgia and Alabama and Texas is completely different. Can they step up to the intensity of high-level football with high-level players? How can they react to not always being the best player and the most athletic player on the field at all times? And that's just such a great learning point for the NFL, because you're going to get to the NFL and you're going to say, okay, well, I'm surrounded by all these other guys who are dudes in college, and I kind of had the chance in the Senior Bowl to acclimate to, NFL talent, acclimate to learning on a team with players who have come from better backgrounds than I do. And Marshall Eden just was fantastic. He's incredible power, pop in his hands, springs off the line, and just an NFL ready build. And while he's not the most NFL ready, and I don't expect him to be like a double-digit sack player, I could see him, throwing in, be a little surprising early on his rookie year, and kind of people are kind of saying, stash him for a year or two. I could see him winning some reps his rookie year.
Yeah, you made a lot of great points there. It's also when you have guys from small schools like that, it's also their first time getting to work with NFL coaches. They bring a lot of NFL coaches in here. Those guys will tell them specific things they want to see. And then to see them go out there and do it and take to that coaching, it only shows that their upside is even better in the NFL. So I like what you said there as well. Maybe he's not a guy who comes in and starts, but as a situational pass rusher, a guy who can come in on third down and get after the quarterback, he could definitely come out this first season with 3 to 6 sacks, and it wouldn't surprise me too much.
Yeah, were there any, corners or safeties that stuck out to you?
Safety was one I tried to watch. I didn't wa obviously, Quinyon Mitchell stood out to anybody who
Yeah.
was down there. The guy was a baller, but I wasn't watching corner as much other than when they battled the wide receivers I liked, but at safety, I've always really liked Cam Kinchins. He's a guy I just love watching, and his teammate from Miami, James Williams, watching him transition to linebacker was it was kind of exciting for me to see his movement skills kind of questionable when it comes to his lateral agility. He can be kind of stiff in the hips at times, but a guy who can come downhill and thump and be a special teams late round guy. I really liked him and thought he made some. I thought he's going to get himself drafted from his performance down there. But I also like. I'll throw out the name Josh Proctor, Ohio State. I was high on him early in his career at Ohio State, and he's kind of went overlooked. He's struggled at times, but I thought he had a good week down in Alabama.
Yeah, he was super impressive. I mean, James Williams is super fun to watch, and he's just a 6'5" and an athletic freak. But it's hard for me to get on board with a player who kind of came in as a 5-star prospect, couldn't really do much in college, and is transitioning. I mean, he's 6'5", and he doesn't like. He's like a 90 percentile height and like 15th percentile weight at the linebacker position. So unless you play him kind of like a Kyle Hamilton light, which I don't know if he has the intelligence and the IQ to play like Kyle Hamilton, it's going to be hard for him to slide in a role. But the NFL is changing, right? You got all these linebacker safety hybrids. And then, yeah, I agree. Cam Kitchens' tape was great. I'm a little worried about his athleticism, just because like he's not the biggest guy, he's not the fastest guy. You hopefully have a great combine to kind of say, okay, like I'm here as a day two player. But he was good. Like he just is very intelligent and very instinctual. And then my favorite players to watch in the secondary, at least in the safety position, were the Utah safety duo, Sion Vaki and Cole Bishop. Who Cole Bishop for me is my favorite safety in the class, and then Sion Vaki was just another awesome dude who I think is going to be a massive combine winner and a massive riser.
Where do you think Cole Bishop goes in the draft?
Like it's so weird because I heard no buzz at all
Mhm.
during the Senior Bowl on Cole Bishop, and it is not like a safety heavy week, right? You can't really see anything in drills unless you can't really see anything in games. Like unless you're like getting a pick once in a while or breaking up a
Yep.
pass once in a while, it's really like it's a position you don't really rely on the Senior Bowl for. So
I've
and there
mentioned
wasn't much.
that to a few people. Like it's hard to judge safeties and running backs down there, even tight
Yeah,
ends a little bit. It's you get some one on ones, but other than that, Ben Sinnott could stand out. But safeties and running
yeah,
backs, it's hard to judge.
and you can't tackle. Like the
Yeah,
linebackers and safeties, you can't hit downfield, right? So there's nothing really to do once the running back gets past the line of scrimmage. You can rally the player. I think he's going to be a second or third round guy. I think all it takes is one team to like a skill set, and he has a lot of great talents. I really have not been hearing a lot of hype on him, and he had great tape at Utah. He's super intelligent, rangy. I spoke to him. He clearly understands the game. He told me how he breaks down offensive schemes and how much tape he watches. Like he's a dude who is committed to the game, and he's a dude who showed it. Right? I think there was one game where he wasn't great. I don't remember exactly who that was against, but he could really do it all at the safety position. And I think he's a day one starter. So again, like maybe there's some injury thing, maybe there's something on tape I haven't seen, but I'm very surprised that I have not heard more hype about Cole Bishop.
that's a good one because Cole Bishop's a guy I've had on my watch list. I haven't got around to watch much Utah tape yet, but he's a guy I didn't notice as much as I thought I would at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, that's because it's hard for safeties to really stand out. But he was a guy on my watch list, and I need to watch more tape on. Very good, very interesting. I like to hear that you have him as your number one safety. Most people I talk to have Tyler Nubin as their number one. So I really like to hear that. And he's a guy I'm excited to watch more tape on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Tyler Newman's great, and I'm going to have them neck and neck. But I guess when you're looking at Cole Bishop's skill set, he's super instinctive and he's rangy and he gets the right spots. And those aren't really the things that stand out at the Senior Bowl. Senior Bowl is about delivering big hits and
Mhm.
breaking up passes in man coverage, which he could do, but aren't his skill set, right? So, like, you get a guy, I guess, like even Cam Kinchins. Cam Kinchins is probably a better slot man, corner, or I guess defensive back than Cole Bishop is. So he's able to stand out a little more.
Yeah, 100%. It's hard for safeties to do much down there. Obviously, you get those one-on-one opportunities and can make some big plays, and those get the whole team hyped up, but you're not in those situations as much in the NFL, and that's not really what he's asked to do all the time. So,
Yeah,
hard to
yeah, for
stand out.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I would say like linebackers, safeties, running backs are the positions where you got to either get an interview or get some insight because you're not really going to get much out of the Senior Bowl if you don't do that.
Yeah, 100%. That's one thing I've actually talked about that a few times. It's like when I went down there to watch offensive line versus defensive line one-on-ones, those were huge. And then the wide receiver cornerback one-on-ones. And then obviously the team drills, you can learn some stuff too. But I felt like without the quarterback talent down there, obviously Bo Nix and Michael Penix were there, but a lot of times they were just checking the ball down as well. There wasn't as much shots downfield as I expected going down there.
Yeah, I mean, what was that like? What was your opinion on the quarterbacks in general down in Alabama?
I wasn't impressed very much. I mean, you had guys like Joe Milton who have a ton of arm but no touch on the ball. Michael Pruitt, I liked a little bit, but he didn't really impress me much down there. He was a guy who I thought would stand out a little bit heading down there. And then Michael Penix and Bo Nix, I just felt like neither of them did enough to really elevate their game. I was hoping one would do something to elevate his game, and neither one really ever did that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I was talking to Benjamin Solak from The Ringer, and he was talking about how it's hard for quarterbacks to really get in a rhythm where you're throwing one every 5 passes, and you're throwing to new receivers, and everything's about timing and rhythm and familiarity, and you don't really get that as a quarterback, which has a lot of truth to it because it's not what they're used to, and the quarterback's all about getting in the zone, and you can't get in the zone there. Yeah, I thought Bo Nix and Michael Penix were fine. I thought they had their up and downs. I don't think either of them came in and were like blew me away. And I don't think either of them came in and put their stamp on a first round prospect and said, okay, I clearly look head and shoulders better than everyone else, but I do think it's hard. I don't know what, like, do you have quarterbacks, like ranked and done?
No, I finished Caleb Williams. I finished Jaden Daniels, and I'm working through Drake May right now. And then the rest, I honestly don't even really care about that much this year. I don't with the Bears, it's something where I don't if we're gonna take a quarterback, it's gonna be one of the early ones. If it's gonna be a quarterback later, I'll watch all their tape on them later. But I mean, I dig so much into tape. Like I've seen all of these guys. I've watched at least 3-4 games of tape, but I don't like to do a full eval without watching the entire season. Like I got to watch every game. Some people do it with they'll write a scouting report on 3 games, and I'm like, I can't do that.
You're watching Jaden Daniels for the Bears?
I was more. I mean, I'm watching them for every. But there's a chance. I do think some people just they think there's only 2 possibilities. Either we trade Justin and keep Caleb, or we trade the number 1 pick and keep Justin. But there are people out there who think there's just 0 chance we could trade down to number 2 with the Commanders. Ryan Poles could easily be like, there's 3 quarterbacks I like in this draft. The Commanders want to give us a couple picks to come up to number 1. We'll move down to number 2 and still be able to land Jaden Daniels or Drake May, who he could like better. So I do think there's a possibility of that. I like to explore all avenues there. But Jaden Daniels, he's too skinny. I feel like he's going to get broken in the NFL. He jumps into contact a lot. Like he'll leave instead of sliding or trying to protect himself. He's trying to hurdle people and jump over people. And I don't see that translating into the NFL. And I also thought with the wide receiver talent, I mean, he's got Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. out there. And there were too many times where he just looking to tuck and run. Sure, he still put up video game numbers, but a lot of times I'm like, in the NFL, I don't know how it translates. And I don't want to see him. He's got some RG3 in his game, and that scares me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little you obviously have that concern with him when he's that skinny, and that like is the biggest issue for me. Like if he was, looked like 10, 15 pounds heavier, like I would, for sure top 10 pick for me. And I think he still is a top 10 pick because of, he's a quarterback. But I think just in terms of grade, he's going to be more in the top 15 range. Just in, has sub concern. He's not like a go ahead, select him and don't think about him. But I mean, I agree that there's the tier of Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels. I just would be super surprised at this point not to see Caleb Williams and Drake May 1 and 2. But I guess we said the same thing. I guess like the Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen here.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, so that's where I think different teams will have them stacked differently. So it depends on we never know exactly where teams are going to have him, but obviously most people are having Caleb Williams, Drake May, and then Jaden Daniels. But all three of them are up there. After that, it's kind of a mix-up, and who knows who's going to be QB4. Could be J.J. McCarthy, could be Bo Nix. There depends on what team ends up trading up for him. They could slide.
Yeah, I mean, off of my film, I mean, for me, I think Bo Nix is like a significant, not significant, but he's, I think, a tier above
Ooh.
J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix to me, just on how I would think they're going to translate to the NFL. But all the hype right now is about J.J. McCarthy, and he fits the classic. You know, if you're a GM and a coach, you want the guy you can come in and mold and turn him into the quarterback. You don't really want that fifth year, sixth year senior who, you know, has been in college forever and may have, you know, reached his ceiling, or people might think he may have reached his ceiling. And it's harder to pass on a guy like J.J. McCarthy than it is to say, okay, we don't need a Bo Nix or Michael Penix, and we can go with a guy we can develop at the next superstar. But I do think that it would be a mistake to pass on Bo Nix for J.J. McCarthy. Michael Penix, I'm not so sure on. I don't really love his his eval. I didn't love his tape so much, but I'd really take.
What did you? Let me ask that. What did you not like about his tape? Because one of the biggest things for me is his injury history. It's like drafting a guy in the first round with that kind of injury history. That's a concern for me. But I loved his release. He gets the ball out quick. I think he's more of a pocket passer. He's not one of these guys that's going to run and get you a ton of yards on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, like, that is obviously the biggest issue is the injuries, right? And he's, you know, just you know, I think it's 6 years in college at this point, right? Like, that is such an issue when you think about how old is he going to be when he gets a second contract, right? You gotta, I'll say this, second, third round, you could talk about other stuff, but when you're drafting first round quarterbacks, especially in, you know, top 15, top 16 picks, you always have to think about, why are we drafting him, and is he going to be our franchise quarterback? Because as a GM and a coach, you kind of get one chance at a quarterback, and if that doesn't work out, you're oftentimes fired. You could look at the history, right? So you need a quarterback who's going to be your guy. You don't need a quarterback who's good for 1 year, solid for 2 years, and then the second you look to give him a contract, he's done. That's the biggest thing. That was my issue with Mac Jones getting picked so high, and it's why I tend to like some of these higher potential quarterbacks, because it's changing a little bit, but by and large, if you're signing a quarterback to a second contract, which is what you expect, you need to pay him a lot of money, and he needs to be able to, you know, do a lot for an NFL team. I mean, you can't just, you know, say, okay, like, you're okay, and we're going to build the rest of the team around you, because, you know, you can do that for the rookie contract, but once you have to start paying him a lot more, it always becomes an issue. And it becomes an issue, you know, you've seen it with many of the top quarterbacks, and with Michael Penix, you know, he has the arm to really succeed in the NFL, right? But I just didn't love his creation ability. I didn't love how he got past the first read. I thought he had some ball placement issues where I think he could be fine. I think he could offer some, you know, gunslinging attributes, but his ceiling wasn't amazing, and the injuries give him, you know, a lower floor. So when you're looking at a guy, okay, like, can he come into the Falcons and play good for the first year, and can they surround him with weapons and a defense and make the playoffs? Sure. And after the first year, everyone's going to be like, he's the man. But 5 years down the line, are you paying him $30-40 million a year? Probably not.
Yeah, I think that one's tough. I think my biggest thing with him is the preface that he's going to fall down the draft board and is going to be a guy teams ignore in the first round because of the medical history. And then once you get past the first round with quarterbacks, like you said, teams either identify someone as their guy or they don't. And that's what causes a lot of times, if a guy doesn't get drafted, he'll just slide down the board. And if something happened like that with Penix and you can get him in round 3, I think he'd be a perfect guy to come in. And I think age is kind of overrated a bit at times with quarterbacks nowadays, at least at the quarterback position. You see more guys playing better into their mid and late 30s than you did in the past. So I think that's a little bit less of a concern. If by the time he gets to his second contract, he's 29 and he actually did develop and is a good player, maybe you give him that second contract. I could see a Jared Goff style of player out of him. That's probably his ceiling. So yes, not as high of a ceiling, but hey, if you can get a guy in the third or fourth round, hey,
For sure.
not bad.
Well, I'll say this: he does a great job at avoiding hits and avoiding sacks. But, you know, when you talk about quarterbacks making it to the late 30s, right? Like Michael Penix with the injuries, like, are we as a community really expecting him to play till, you know, 38, right? And he could, right? You don't know I'm not a doctor, as I said before. Like, we don't know with his medical stuff, but it is harder to say when his second contract is going to be 29, and you're going to say, okay, are we giving him a lot of money to carry a team into his early 30s when he doesn't offer much as a creator? And he doesn't, I think I disagree a little bit with the draft community on, I don't love how he gets past his first read, but I don't think he offered so much upside to be able to give him that contract, in 30, 31, 32.
Yeah, when you're talking about a third or fourth round guy, though, if
For
you
sure,
don't even
for sure.
you don't even need him to get to that second contract. If you
Yeah.
need to be a guy who can come in and be your QB2 for a team, think of a team like the Cowboys or even the 49ers. If you
For
can get a
sure.
guy like that in the fourth round who can come in and end up being a starter and leading you for a while, I'm not really worried about what you're paying him. I just like his upside, but enough quarterbacks. I'm not. I've stayed away from the quarterbacks. Give me another wide receiver.
Let me think. We could talk about Roman Wilson, who's just
Okay.
another
Yep.
great Senior Bowl receiver, dominated from the get-go. But I want to hear what's your thoughts on A.D. Mitchell, the Texas receiver, because I keep flip-flopping and he's a tough evaluation.
He's my next full evaluation. I'm watching through Texas tape now. I love his size. I love his body control. He's got a good wingspan. I think right now it's a toss-up with him with Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas for my wide receiver 4. I'm done with Brian Thomas, and I'm currently evaluating Keon and Adonai Mitchell. I think Adonai Mitchell could end up being my wide receiver 4. I think I see some things that I like better than Brian Thomas so far as his ability to beat press coverage, ball concentration skills. I think he's done it a little more consistently than Brian Thomas has. Brian Thomas only had 1 year of production, and it's just I also see a lot of little things on tape with Brian Thomas, slipping out of his routes, having inconsistent beating press coverage, and then dropping easy catches as well. I saw that a little bit too much, just the concentration drops where he's turning his head upfield a little bit too early and not. Those are easy things to clean up. But right now, all 3 guys look like legit weapons to me. So I want to hear, are you done with those guys? Where are you at with the Keon Coleman? Because the top 3 are pretty set. Everyone might have a different order, but 4, 5, 6 for me are right there. I have them right now. I have Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas, pretty much neck and neck.
So yeah, obviously I have the top 3, amazing class, and then at 4 I have Brian Thomas. Similar things with you. I think he's the best athlete, size, speed, just classic first round receiver. Get him in the back there, and then my 5 is actually Ladd McConkey.
Ooh, okay.
Who I just think medicals withstanding. If medicals come out and I have to adjust, I have to adjust. But in terms of tape and production, I think he's going to be an immediate producer. I think he's great, and I think people are going to overstate him because he's not the craziest athlete, even though he'll torch pretty much any corner in a one-on-one and from the slot, right? And I think that's becoming more valuable in the NFL. And then I have Coleman and Mitchell literally neck and neck. Like, I'm going to have to just either flip a coin or see something from the combine because it's tough. There's such different reasons for them to be in the spot that they are, right? Like Keon Coleman, I'm just nervous about his separation. I'm nervous about his route running. And then A.D. Mitchell, it's like he does a lot of things great. He's super fluid. He's just effortlessly athletic in ways most receivers aren't. And he has that X potential, but he also has so much inconsistency down to down. He has so much route inconsistency. His play strength is inconsistent. And when you have those things on tape, I'm not saying it's a character concern, but you wonder why he isn't able to show the same, consistency down to down. A guy, like I said, like Ladd McConkey is. Like Ladd McConkey down to down was a better receiver this year than A.D. Mitchell. But, A.D. Mitchell has that movement ability that most receivers can only dream of.
Yeah, for me, it's the size, speed, athletic combinations of those 3 is why I have him over Ladd. Nothing against Ladd McConkey. I just think he's limited in the NFL to a slot receiver. And even though the NFL is transitioning, slot receivers are used a lot more, probably on the field 70 to 80% of the time. Teams are 3 wide. And you see guys like Cooper Kupp who just eat out of the slot. But for me, I think it just puts a little bit of a cap on his ceiling for me. So I have him behind the other 3. But I expected to be in the same position as you. When I watched Brian Thomas's tape, I thought he would lock up that wide receiver 4 spot for me. And I don't think he did that. I have a couple question marks after finishing his tape where I was like, I just didn't see it. He has a lot of the traits where, hey, if you miss out on Marvin Harrison Jr. and you end up with Brian Thomas Jr. Later in the first round, I wouldn't be super mad. I wouldn't be disappointed, but I I left the door open for Keon Coleman or Adonai Mitchell to take that spot.
Yeah, for sure. Like they have a lot of stuff that is super enticing, and they just have the traits. It's just a question of, I think I'm a little more concerned with Brian Thomas's tendency to win purely off traits. Like he was just winning on straight line speed and agility and power a lot of the time, which doesn't really work unless you're DK Metcalf as a rookie, right? Like most or nearly all receivers have some adjustment period where they say, okay, I'm not, the physical specimen, or not even schemes are harder. You can blanket coverage, right? It's harder to win one-on-ones with pure physicality, and you kind of have to shift your game to that sense. Another guy, did you watch Xavier Worthy? If you're watching Texas, did you get to him?
Oh, yeah. Too many drops. I had him. So if I go back last year, heading into the early evaluation of the season, I had Xavier Worthy as a first round. He was up there. He was in my top 3. And I have so many questions about his hands right now that I don't know where he goes. I think he could fall as far as the 3rd round.
Outside of hands, what were your thoughts?
He's electric. He can get open. There's still questions there. I mean, I think he might have to be a slot guy in the NFL. I kind of want to see what he weighs in at the combine and what his 40 time is. But he looks like a guy who has true speed. Yeah, he looks like a guy who's athletic, who can score with the ball in his hands, kind of like just a budget Malik Neighbors to some extent as far as this year's draft goes. He's a guy who's very dangerous in the open field. He can get at separation, but this wide receiver class with how many drops he had and his size, he's just kind of getting lost in the shuffle for me right now. And I have a hard time placing him. For a guy I had a 1st round grade on, I think right now he's slipping. He's a day 2 pick right now for me.
Yeah, he's going to get a lot of, national media love when he just destroys the 40. And I think he's going to perform well in whatever agility drills he does. But
yeah, if he runs a 4.3 or something, yeah, he can vault himself right back into that 1st round talk.
I think he's going to, I would not be surprised at all if he ran a 4.3, like a low 4.3. That's the type of speed he has. And the quickness and the burst is what gets you a great 40 time. But the drops are an issue. And then it just, I don't know how he breaks off any route stem in the NFL. Like you look at Jalen Hyatt this year, who every single time he ran a route against a cornerback, he just got pushed out of the way. He got moved off his line. And that was happening to Xavier Worthy. Like he was playing at like 170. Like you cannot do that in the NFL, right? They're getting a little bit more tanked out, but I'm just nervous about Xavier Worthy getting to the NFL and just getting dominated at the catch point, getting dominated on, comebacks and corners and out routes, anything that requires, any amount of physicality to separate.
Yeah, it's 100%. That's why I think even though he could excel at the outside in the college level, I think in the NFL he might be limited to be a slot guy or a guy who, you could move him around, have him in motion, do some exciting things with him. But as far as beating press coverage, winning those one-on-one, beating guys physically, I don't know unless he adds some muscle and gets a little bit bigger in the NFL.
Yeah, it's always tough to project these guys. Like everyone was like, "Oh, Devontae Smith will put on muscle." Well, it was like Devontae Smith spent a few years at Alabama, which is pretty much an NFL team in terms of their nutritional program and weightlifting program, and he didn't really put on much. Like if Xavier Worthy, hasn't, put on much weight, and maybe he doesn't want to, maybe he wants that speed over putting on size. But if you're at Texas and you're not putting on the pounds, maybe that's just how he is. He was gifted with track speed, and he's not going to be the biggest guy. And hopefully, teams will be able to talk to him, and you'll be able to talk about avoiding contact or spinning out of it or ways he could win at the line of scrimmage, beat cornerbacks on the release. So they don't even get a chance to get hands on him. But it's always tough to draft these guys just going against a massive corner, going against Charvarius Ward. How are you going to do anything?
That's a tough one to project. And I think I'm glad you brought him up because I think he's one of the toughest projections for me when I'm trying to figure out where he goes, because I was so high on him early on because of that speed and his explosiveness. I felt, hey, this is a guy, when you're looking at him early on in his career at Texas, it's like, this guy's going in the 1st round in a couple of years. But then when you get here and you're looking at all the receivers in this class, it's like, okay, well, I like this guy better than Xavier Worthy. I like this guy better than Xavier Worthy. So he keeps falling down, and there's still guys I haven't fully evaluated yet, like Troy Franklin and Jermaine Burton, who I have no idea really where to put them. So it's a really tough class for wide receiver. And seeing where some of these guys go is going to be one of the most exciting things. We have the
Yeah.
combine coming up this week. So those 40 times are coming out. And I think that's where you're going to start to place guys. If guys run 4.6s, you know they're going to be moving down the board a little bit. And guys like Xavier Worthy and the speedsters, if they run 4.3s or anything sub 4.4, that gets you moved up NFL teams draft boards. They want to see that deep speed. So, man, it was awesome. I probably talk to you all day, but I know we're both really busy right now. It's NFL draft time, so I appreciate having you on once again. Any final words you want to say, and again, remind the people where they can find you as well.
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at Mr. Irrelevant. Toilets the titles, a bunch of work down there. We're gonna start pounding out content, and then Steelers Depot. You can catch my profiles. But it was really an honor to create content with you. You know, we've been talking about this for a while. We even, I was looking. We had some chats even before the Senior Bowl. So to meet you at the Senior Bowl and then come back on and talk football, I'm excited to do this again. And this is awesome to get it started.
Well, I didn't even realize we had chats before the Senior Bowl.
We had chat. I mean, we both. I remember meeting you. We both followed each other.
Oh, okay.
Twitter.
Did we?
Like,
Okay, I didn't even
I
realize.
saw. I think
man.
I was.
Yeah.
I saw. Like I looked it up. I think we had some comments on some players. I think maybe
That's
from last
awesome,
year,
man.
earlier this year.
Yeah, I know Bill and Jacob Lintner, they had the same thing. That's how they had met, was some kind of interaction they had. And it's the one thing. There's a lot of toxicity on Twitter and a lot of crazy people, but meeting other people, and that was my favorite thing about the Senior Bowl, getting to meet you and other guys down there. There's a lot of us out there who really just enjoy scouting, and these players excite us, and we get excited for the NFL draft. This is like Christmas time of the year for me, so I'm excited for it, man. It was an honor to have you on. I think you're awesome. Love talking to you, man. Anytime you want to come on, just send me a message.
Awesome. All right.
Special thanks to both Jacob Lintner and Efram Geller for joining the show. Meeting them down at the Senior Bowl and then getting a chance to talk NFL draft with them was a pleasure. Thanks to everyone who watched the video. Remember to hit the like button for me. The combine is officially underway and testing begins on Thursday. The NFL offseason is about to get really exciting. I have an all 22 video on defensive end Jared Verse I'm going to release on Patreon tomorrow. I'll also drop that video on Facebook as well. A ton more videos on the way. Stay tuned, guys. And until next time, bear down.